Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities in Miniatures, and it is time for, honestly and truly, one of my all-time favorite obscurities in literature. Because today we're going to look at something that has already been on this channel, so if you're looking at this book, do not fret, it is something new. We've talked about it before, but we're going to talk about, honestly, truly, something really near and dear to me, and that is SD Gundam. Because obviously you clicked on the link and you saw that it said SD Gundam, so yeah. I have been a fan of the SD stuff probably since I first helped my brother building old kit, probably let's say circa 93? 94? I don't think it was earlier than that. The timeline for me, now Gundam is interesting. I first discovered Gundam, if you haven't heard these stories before, and if you have, I apologize, just sit through it anyways. I first discovered Gundam probably in the very late tail end of the 80s, early 90s. I had a local shop near my grandparents' house that was just clearing everything out, and I really discovered a lot of this stuff firsthand without any clue what it was at the time, but I absolutely loved building models. I've mentioned this many times, and just went hog wild every opportunity I got to visit there. So, eventually did figure out what Gundam was because the name was on the box in English, and that was about the only thing. First really started with Zeta Gundam kits, and then by just the process of kind of figuring out what's what in the pre-internet days, really kind of got into things full swing around the time that Victory was wrapping up. G Gundam was coming out strong at the time. I can remember picking up a lot of the 1/144th kits when they were first fresh on the shelves. By the time Wing rolled around, what was that, like 95, 96? I mean, we were really thick in the deep of things. So by then, we kind of knew what it was. I'd picked up like Gundam catalogs and stuff, but honestly and truly, I absolutely adored the SD stuff just because it was so wild, colorful, funky looking, tons of stuff included. It just really captivated me in a way that even the regular Gundam stuff didn't. And I mean, if you look at a lot of the stuff that I enjoy, it does tend to be more on the fantasy end of things, which really shouldn't come as a big surprise because that's been a major part of the SD Gundam stuff from the very beginning. So, we're going to really get into the nitty-gritty today. And I wanted to start with this book here, Koji Yokoi's SD Collections. Now, this book primarily isn't only focused on this SD Gundam stuff, but it has everybody and everything. And the reason I really wanted to talk about this first is because the artwork for the SD Gundam world, or what have you, because you had like the card-ass cards, you had a ton of video games coming out, you had comics being serialized, and then you had the kits coming out too. All of that first got collected at about maybe 1988, 89 when B Club first put out an Art of SD Gundam book. Now, a lot of that stuff just so happens to have ended up in this book as well. Obviously, they have the very iconic piece right here, and I've shown this before, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but some of these pieces are really, at this point, getting up there in the years. And a lot of these pieces were also in that very same book published way back in 1988 or 89, whenever it was. Okay. Now, what's cool about this book is that you do get the breakdown of all of the basic machines, and some of them kind of ended up in this book later on. Obviously, there are some later releases, but I mean, like, I'm looking at this stuff right here is absolute prime classic SD Gundam work. And like I said, we've seen this before. There's all kinds of modern stuff. Very cool. What I haven't shown you, though, is the sequel book, SD Gundam 2. And it has a lot more topical and modern stuff with the upgrade of the King Gundam III, I believe, Zenkaiger, Patlabor, and Shingetter Arc. Or Getter Arc. I can't remember his name, obviously. So, this book is interesting because I remember thinking to myself at the time, I remember seeing a lot of artwork in those old Art of SD Gundam books, and some of it was missing from the first Koji Yokoi book. It's because it's in this one. So you get a lot of the old vintage, some of these not so vintage, obviously for the 25th anniversary, maybe not so much, but like the G Commander series. You get a lot of the artwork that was also on the early kits as well. The Daishogun here, various Musha Gundams. A lot of these were actual model kits because, well, I built them. Absolutely love this one. I know my brother had this one, enjoyed, finally got it from him at some point, swapping, trading, I don't remember what we did. And you get all kinds of these weird, interesting armored Gundams that really I wasn't even familiar with myself. The Command Gundam, one of the very few that actually got a full-size Gundam cloth figure back in the early 90s. Again, there's just a huge variety of stuff, some of the more modern ones here in this book, and then we get into other things that didn't end up in the first one. Zabungle robots, my favorite Dunbine. I love Dunbine. Dunbine was probably the very first Japanese model mecha kit that I built. It was a Bastol. And I put one of the legs on backwards, which I will never forget, or never be able to forget, because somebody will remind me of my family. But yeah, those were some of the very first I ever built that I knew what the heck I was doing, and I just couldn't stop from there. Mentioned it before, what's interesting about this book is that a lot of these pieces, especially of very specific mechs, ended up becoming the prototype for what would become the Super Robot War games, and they became kind of these iconic pieces. I know both the Dunbine and the Villine absolutely use those. I'm trying to think. I know that the L game was in some of the later games. I don't remember what artwork they used for him. It was kind of cool just to have it in here. Lasner, we get into a bunch of other stuff. Quick showcase of Go Nagai figures. We get a very cool visual history of the first 20-something plus years of Super Sentai. We get all kinds of other heroes in there. And I'm just moving on. Pad Labor, again, same time frame as a lot of the early Gundam work, but the best part is when we start to get some of the funkier stuff, like the early work. Quick artist breakdown, got the years on some of these, 88 for like the L game stuff, not surprising. Now, as cool as those are, that's not what I really wanted to spend my time talking about, even though I'm seeing it's like almost 10 minutes in. What if you want more Gundam? Okay. I'm going to show you two books that I think are kind of probably the best in that regard, and those are the SD Gundam Historia. As of right now, there's two main books. You have one that's going to be focused on the Musha Gundams, or the samurai stuff, and then you're going to have the Knight Gundam Gaiden stuff, which is going to be more of just the generic fantasy. Since you're on top, we'll start with you. And this one is really cool because it does, like I said, have all of the fantasy artwork. It gives you a quick breakdown, which I'm sure, at least for me, I don't have the patience to read. Kind of a history of a lot of the series, where they came from, the main characters and players. I mean, some of this stuff, obviously, the classic Knight Gundam started with the card-ass cards and kind of progressed into the various video games and RPGs, which this is absolutely based on. And one of the coolest things about this book is that you get all of the bad guys. All of the bad guys are done up as various typical fantasy enemies. The Crab Marasai, the Turtle Gog, the Slime Arzam, and Warrior Zaku's, the Fighter Dom, Night Gans, Skeleton Dogas. So as this book goes, you have just about every single piece of color character art, and you know, some of them get quite elaborate. You get all the heroes for each of the various series or sub-series that have existed. You get a lot of the human folks in here, and again, you get all the cool bad guy stuff. And all too often with these types of things, we tend to see only the good guys, and I love the fact that we got the bad guys. You never got kits of most of this stuff. There's a few here and there, but like just these random monsters, come on, they never got it. And that's really half the fun of this book, especially as somebody who grew up playing all those, you know, typical turn-based RPGs and seeing all this stuff laid out. I absolutely love picking up old video game guidebooks that have like the bestiary section, especially when they spend a good amount of time talking about it. So again, this is the Night Gundam stuff. Typical fantasy tropes in here. There's dragons, there's undead, there's everything, and get into like the Gunlander stuff. This is a fairly recent book as well. As you can see, it's, if I zoom it in there, 2023. And the cool thing is, I mean, these two books, the Gundam Historias, SD Gundam Historias, have just about every single thing that's been published. Okay? Let me get kind of a breakdown of the main Musha Gundams. Again, and we have every little interesting piece of artwork, and there are just tons and tons. Funny thing, I just found this, actually both kits today. I was cleaning out my old classroom and stumbled across them. Absolutely loved both of these kits right here. Like I said, a lot of this holds both nostalgic value for me, considering I painted an overwhelming majority of these, and the fact that there's stuff in here that I'm seeing for the very first time. Loved this series of kits. They had, like, each of them came with a mount horse thing that the three can then combine together, and, like, you could take, this was like a big shield, obviously not to scale, and they all had, like, tons of little bits that can combine into a big weapon, I remember. In fact, I think there was a picture of him. Like, I hate looking through this book, and then there's like these cool full-size Gundams, and I'm like, why didn't we ever get stuff like that? It was always like, you know, one-year war type things. Yeah, that's absolutely, you can see it's got the 3 heads here. So again, if you just want a cool overview of just about every single design that was ever made, the SD Gundam Historia books are going to be the ones for you. But let's say you're crazy like me, and that's not enough. Then what you're going to want to look for, and I think this is almost as good, but I think this is more a bit for the hardcore connoisseur, you're going to want the SD Gundam Design Works books. Now, these are interesting because it's going to be based off of very specific artists. Obviously, we looked at the Koji Yokoi book. Susumu Imaishi just had a book actually recently come out and is already on its way over here, so I'll probably do a video on it in the very near future, but it's kind of cool because it's got a lot of his illustrations for model boxes, and I don't think they're in this, now that I think about it, but also a bunch of other stuff that he did. And if one of these wasn't enough for you, there was a very recent second book, and again, more of some of the first artists, but then you got other guys joining in the fun as well. These are pretty cool because, again, got a quick breakdown of a lot of the SD Gundam history, but look, you get to see all the background stuff, which for me is an absolute plus. We've got very, very old rough designs from Koji Yokoi, the guy that did all of the original SD art, and he really gets into some fun stuff here. Of course, there's more modern things, but it's also work that isn't in his other 2 books, which is kind of neat. There is a bit of color stuff here and there, but again, you can really go digging down into the weeds if you want to find like all the rough variant sketches, which to me, I absolutely love. And then I'm like looking through this book and its partner here, and I'm trying to figure out where is some of this. I don't even remember seeing it in the other ones. And that's kind of the cool thing. Now, Susumu Imaishi also was there from very early on. These, I want to say the BB Senshi ones, I don't remember if this was the very first of the Gundam kits that didn't have the weird, stupid wind-up walking mechanism, but also had the rocket launchers that could shoot. Every early Gundam, SD Gundam kit, I should say, had firing weapons you had to put the springs in, which was always kind of fun. As you can see here, it's got like some of his G generation artwork. But again, breakdown on a lot of these designs, early rough color work, box art, trying to figure out the concept of transformation and combining on some of these. And again, some real rough designs from a variety of different artists. Getting into the more modern stuff here. Now, this book, like I said, has some really neat stuff I'm not even familiar with. The sequel, just as much so. It is cool that they have some of the pages of the old comics that were always on the back of the instructions. So I see, like, with the Susumu Imaishi's got some of his Three Kingdoms artwork. I believe he did just about all of the Three Kingdom SD Gundam artwork. I had that. I, with no exaggeration, can honestly tell you that at a certain point in time, I owned or had built just about every single SD Gundam kit that existed, all 300 something plus. I mean, over a span of close to 40 years, but, it is what it is, which is kind of cool. In fact, there was a recent, maybe not recent, too recent, I want to say about 2012, Hobby Japan put out a set of history of SD Gundam kit books. And obviously it's up to that point, so you might be missing some of the newer stuff. But unfortunately, these days, the more unique stuff has kind of dwindled off to the side. You still have, like, the SD Gundam World Heroes or whatever it's called. They still have some neat original designs here and there. But it's just not the same in terms of the complexity and the colors and the parts. But let's say that's still not enough for you. Let's say you really want to keep getting deeper and deeper into this stuff. Then what you're going to want are these books, the SD Gundam Memorial books. And this is a series that is still coming out, I believe, and I don't even own them all yet. This is, well, they don't have really effective numbering, but check this out. This is going to be very similar to the previous books, but there is stuff in here that even I don't recognize from any of the other ones that we've already shown. This is going to be more of a line art encyclopedia of all of the various entries that have shown up in comics, shown up in model kits, shown up as trading card sets, shown up as video game background characters, or in the instruction manual. There is just a ton of stuff. Now, this book specifically focuses on the knight stuff. This is more on the pure fantasy stuff, and the books keep getting bigger, thicker, and fatter as they go. And again, there is a bunch of concept art here, not as much, but you get a quick breakdown on just about every one of these, and there's no repeats between these little books, I should say. But again, there's stuff in here that absolutely is not in any of the other books that I've shown you yet. Now, honestly and truly, this is one of my favorite concept style, is that SD stuff. The King Gundams, and a Barbados, and a Unicorn. This is more recent ones, and I mean, like, I've flipped through these with my brother, and he's like, I don't even recognize this stuff, which is half the fun. I'm like, all you modelers out there, I mean, nobody makes this stuff. I love these designs. I'm like, anybody ever wants to start a generic fantasy SD mecha series of Patreon sculpts? I mean, hell, I'll do it myself at some point if I can ever figure out how to sculpt decently. Nobody does stuff like this. If that's not enough, here we have just the animation designs. Now, this one's kind of crazy because this has got stuff that, again, is nowhere else to be found. You start off with all of the old-fashioned character designs, and they can't help but have just naked Puru and Puru 2. And you get into the really ugly, oddly designed early SD Gundam stuff. Get into the mid-90s, early 90s, and they had really weird angular designs. Again, I feel like all we've seen so far are characters, but no, there is absolutely a ton of mecha art in here as well. Even though I keep showing all these figures, human characters, I mean, it's all in here too. Some of this is going to be referenced in the other books. Some of it not so much. But again, there's just a ton of it, and the deeper you go, you get more and more of just the pure Gundam type stuff. As I show more human folks again. It's like always the same humans too. But what really makes this one interesting to me and really stand out is the fact that, besides the fact we've got so much interesting stuff, you get some of the later animation. But SD Gundam Force. Now, some of you American fans might remember this did actually show on, what was it, Cartoon Network or Toonami? One of those, because I can remember picking up some of the figures and I had them on display as they slowly released in the US. But you got the characters, you've got everything from that show here. And I'm like, I don't remember half of this. But it's in there. And honestly, I can't think of many other places you're going to find the SD Gundam Force artwork. But then, just as a nice little topper off, we have a bit on the Three Kingdoms series. Again, which there is stuff that hasn't shown up everywhere else yet. Making this book kind of a nice, unique addition to a collection. Giving you a quick breakdown here. And like I said, this is not the only stuff out there. And this is incomplete too. Here you can see there is an actual book dedicated to nothing but all of the Three Kingdom designs. This is just the animated stuff. There were comics, there were games, there were multiple series of models. They're all in this book. I don't have it yet. I will at some point. This book right here is going to be all of the Sengokuden. This is all of the samurai stuff. I don't have that one yet either. We're going to get there. There's also one that I really want to get, which has the Gunlander, which was the techno-barbaric kind of like He-Man treatment for Gundams, which is just absolutely bizarre, but it is a thing. Some of these are getting a little bit older. This is from 2015, so some of it may be not the most up-to-date. I see Gumbarai Raijino. Ooh, there's a Gear Fighter Dendo Memorial? I'm like, I might have to grab that. And a Wataru Memorial? You might see some of these books showing up in the near future. I actually have a book with most of the Braves in there, and we'll have to see that at some point. But honestly, I mean, this is an ever-expanding work in progress, but hopefully if you are interested in this stuff, which I most certainly am, and I could talk your ears off, trust me. If I had to pick a book, I would say probably the Gundam Historias are going to be your best choice if you want just a lot of cool-looking pictures. If you want to get more into the nitty-gritty or specific artists, then yeah, I'd say get the Design Works or any of these artists. A lot of them actually do have their own material, which I'll show you in the future as well. But to me, the Gundam Historias are probably the best in terms of just having a lot of content. You can't go wrong with the Koji Yokoi books either. Any of these, I think, are going to give you a lot of fun. But hopefully this leaves you with a little bit more of a purposeful start to your trek through these kits. It just kind of bums me out these days when I can remember paying under $5 for just about any of them. I can remember paying 200 or 300 yen for like the smaller SD Gundam G generation figures, which were like really stripped down basic kits when those were first coming out. That was like in the PlayStation 1 era. Jeez. They've gotten recycled and repurposed and rehashed over the years, but I mean, most of that stuff is like almost $10, $15 now. It's kind of sad because I can remember just, with 1,000 yen coming out with like 4 model kits. I always loved that. But it is what it is. Maybe we'll see some new stuff in the future. Maybe we'll see somebody dig into the depths of these books that isn't just a garage kit resin company that's going to charge, 40,000 yen for one of these, which is cool but sad at the same time. And believe me, they have. But hopefully this is something of interest to everybody besides me, and even if it isn't, I don't care because I just get to look at pretty pictures of Gundams all day. So, with that said then, thanks to everybody who actually sat through me rambling for nearly 30 minutes. But this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye!